Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we're going to be going over Cold Glacier Runemaster. I am finally back from vacation, and I thought I would boot up some Character Found. So if you do not know, Character Found is a mode in Last Epoch that allows you to play a fresh start with your characters, meaning that you have no access to all of your other characters' gear, you don't have access to their faction rank, you don't have access to anything. So I leveled from level 1 all the way to level, I think it was like 99 on this character. We got to 400 corruption, all on gear that I found on the ground. And that overall is great, as that's my preferred way of playing Last Epoch, as I don't believe the game has enough content to provide after that point in most cases. But thankfully, Character Found is finally back. So let's talk about the build. So the idea behind Cold Glacier is we are utilizing the nodes that create ice vortexes. So the way this works is Glacier hits 3 times in 3 different explosions, and then you can leave behind an ice vortex per explosion. Now, normally you'd have 3 per time you cast Glacier, because 1 2 3, but we are also disabling the largest explosion. There's a few reasons for that. Mainly, it's for the mana cost reduction. This brings our Glacier all the way down to like 10 mana cost. This means that we aren't consuming a significant portion of our mana every single time we want to class Glacier. And the beautiful thing is the ice vortexes, they don't actually scale the same way that like the Glaciers do, meaning that the Ice Vortex is the same whether it's cast by a small glacier or a large glacier. So all we're doing is just making our mana significantly better for really no downside, which is great, right? Now these are cold damage AoEs. They scale off as spell damage, and we want a bunch of them. They all stack on top of each other. Now, normally most people have not played with these things, mainly because they are commonly referred to as garbage, as for a while they kind of were garbage up until they finally bug fixed Frostclaw. So inside Frostclaw, there's a node that lets you stack up a few stacks of Frozen Vengeance, I believe, and then whenever you cast Frostclaw, you get a bunch of ice spirals. Now, while these ice spirals are up, utilizing Age of Vengeance, this gives us a large amount of cold penetration with Glacier and also a massive amount of AoE. Now, right now, we are giving our Glacier 144% cold penetration and 88% increased AoE. And that is usually for around 3 to 4 seconds, I found, for the most part after testing. Now, this means that this also applies to the sub skills of Glacier, including the ice vortices. And as you can tell in the footage, they get huge. Like, the ice vortices are just absolutely massive, and they all last for 4 seconds. You can stack a bunch of them. So you just wait up for your Frozen Vengeance stacks, you cast Frostclaw, then you cast as many ice vortices as possible. And for the most part, this has got me all the way to 400 corruption. Now, this could push much higher if we were to utilize the tech with Peak of the Mountain, where we cap our critical strike chance with nodes inside Glacier, and that allows us to grab critical rejuvenation, which will give us 1% of our mana cost per crit with Glacier. And since we're hitting twice, because we have 2 explosions, as long as we would have 500 mana and capped crit, we could infinitely cast Glacier without having a single problem with mana whatsoever. Now, the problem with this, of course, is, I'll be honest, farming for LP Peak of the Mountains right now is very bothersome and not really worth it for this current character. But in Merchant's Guild, or if you're playing with this character for much longer in CLF, you could very easily snag yourself a decent Peak of the Mountain. But for the purposes of this character, that upgrade is not what we're doing. We're doing what I would call the normal version of the build without the Peak of the Mountain stuff. So yeah, overall, the build has been wonderful. I'm pretty happy with the defenses as well. We are building a bunch of HP to benefit from reactive wards inside the mage basic tree. This, on top of utilizing Twisted Heart, means that we can get a lot of our HP as ward, meaning that we can have a decent amount of ward and HP at the same time. Now, one of the problems is I was playing this in CLF and in Character Found. That means that my gear is very well below average. It's very garbage in general, and one of the biggest problems with my gear currently is my lack of intelligence. Right now, I believe my character is sporting like 11 intelligence, which which is a very low amount of ward retention, or at like 98% word retention. If you had proper gearing, you'd have like 400% word retention, which would mean that this character could then push to like maybe 1,500 corruption. It really depends. The thing about it is like this build is nowhere near as good as like some other Runemaster builds that currently exist, but those Runemaster builds are absolutely fucking insane. So who knows, right? With all that being said, let's go in game and talk about the build some more, shall we? All right, so here we are in game with the character. Let's go over the skills. So the main things that are important for this character is utilizing Lesser Glacier for that 80% less mana cost. This gives us a decent manageable mana cost of 10, and that on top of course, Breaking Point, meaning that we have significantly less mana cost than if we were doing the Gigantic Glacier. Then we grab Whirlpools, which gives us a 60% chance of the explosion to give us an ice vortex. Then we grab 2 points in Moderate Vortex for 40%. And then we also have 40% from Lesser Vortex. This means that we have a 100% chance on every explosion we do to give us an ice vortex, which is a 100% chance. So we'd always get 2 whenever we click, which that is good enough as it is, right? Then we grab the nodes here, Engulfing Vortex, to give us a 100% chance to get a greater ice vortex, which gives us a much bigger one, while also it does a lot more damage. We definitely want this. It does kind of make Glacier into kind of a point horror tree, though. Then we grab 2 points in Moderate Destruction and 3 points in Lesser Destruction. So the idea behind these nodes is this is giving the middle explosion Glacier Ice Vortex more damage, and then this is giving the small Ice Vortex more damage. Now, the problem here is normally, if you read the tag here, it says Ice Vortices scale with increased cold damage, damage over time, spell damage, but not with other nodes on this tree. That is factually incorrect now. That is because a while ago they changed it so that more damage inside the tree now actually applies to the sub skills unless specifically directly noted, and this has not been updated since they made that change. This is supposed to say it does scale with the other nodes on this tree, and that's why we're utilizing Moderate Destruction and of course Lesser Destruction. And the last node we care about is Static Collapse. This makes it so we can target the glacier instead of it being in front of us like this. This means that we can actually play with range and actually do a very large amount of AoE very quickly, which is really cool. Makes this build a lot of fun to play with in game. Then let's talk about Frostclaw. So Frostclaw, the main things we care about is Frozen Sleeper. So we get the Ice Spiral stacks, 4 points to Chaos Roll, so we get double spirals. And the reason why we care about that is we want Age of Vengeance. This makes it so that we get 144% gold penetration with Glacier and also an 88% increased area. So this is my normal Ice Vortex, but if I use this, my Ice Vortexes are much bigger and also deal a lot more damage. That makes it so that this build is playable. Without this node, this build would not be playable. Now, another thing that's cool about this is if we drain our mana real quick here, as you can see, I can actually utilize Glacier now to gain mana back. That is because of this node here, Gift of Winter, giving us a 36% chance to gain 12 mana on cast. This, on top of all the cast speed we have, means that we can actually sustain mana pretty easily. We also utilize a node here, Bright Frost, so we can cleanse ailments, which is great while doing monoliths. Then for Frostwall, the main reason why we care about this is the 14% more damage against chilled enemies. That's great. Then we also grab Brand the Invader, so we apply Brand with our Frostwall. That means we can get benefits from the 10% more damage versus branded enemies, and we also get the 7% more damage versus branded bosses. This means that we get a very large amount of more damage from utilizing Frostwall, which allows us to take down bosses in the endgame. Then for our Runic Invocation, all we care about is CFC, Rainwind's Frostguard, so we take 30% less damage while we have Ward, which is great, right? Then we also use it as a teleport, and we also utilize this node here for the cast speed and the flat damage. And of course, the rest of the tree is to help with this. Then Flame Ward. Flame Ward is your stereotypical setup of just, normal flame ward stuff. Like everyone uses the same flame ward tree. And that's pretty much it for the skills. Now for the passives that matter, the main one is we're building around reactive ward. That's actually why my character has a lot of HP, which normal Runemaster builds do not. This is a very easy way in character found, or when you make a new character on mage, to get a lot of chinkiness very quickly, because as you can tell, whenever I cast a spell here and I go under my certain amount of HP, we gain like well over almost 2000 ward whenever we do that, and that has a 6-second cooldown. As you can tell, it gives us a lot of ward very quickly. That makes it with alongside silver rune, so it has a 6-second cooldown. This means that we can gain a large amount of our HP as ward very quickly. This on top of Twisted Heart works perfectly for us. It just allows us to get a lot of ward on cast, which is great, right? Then other things that we care about, all the cast speed here, all the cast speed here, all the cast speed here as well. Then here, Edict of the Scion gives us increased area, which increases the area of the ice vortices. It also gives us a large amount of ward whenever we utilize our Glacier, because as you can tell, whenever we have 3 runes, we gain a very large amount of ward whenever we cast Glacier, which is great. Then after that, just the more damage against branded enemies, more damage against bosses and rares, right? Then just 1 point in rune avalanche, so we get the flat damage. And that's pretty much it for the passives. Now let's talk about the gearing. So like I said, my gearing is absolutely atrocious. I am only rank, I'm only rank, I think rank 7 on COF. I'm only level 98 and we're in 400 corruption. That's pretty good for a new character. So let's talk about the gear, shall we? So here, our helmet here, instead of that Elemental Nova flat, we should actually get Intelligence, and that would make this much better. Amulet here, mana regen, DoT, resistances, really good. Really want that those resistances, so we can stack HP elsewhere. Then for our staff here, cast speed, DoT, cold pen. This is pretty much exactly what you would want on a staff. I like the temple staff because not only does it give us the -3 mana cost, it also gives us the mana regen. On top of that, lots of nice mana regen per second. Chest here, this is almost perfect, but instead of that +3 to Flame Rush, it should be +4 to Glacier, and instead of that +2 to Glacier, it should be Intelligence instead, and then this would be a perfect chest piece otherwise. Then for rings here, just some intelligence, some resistances. On the other ring, DoT, mana regen, and resistances. Belt here, instead of that cold damage, that should be mana regen, but you take what you can get. Here, atrophies, we have frailty on them, but other than that, nothing else really. The atrophy plus the cold pen on the staff makes it so that whenever we cast Glacier without the frozen vengeance stacks from Frostclaw, meaning that we can actually still do damage even without them, which is great. Boots here, instead of that strength, that should be intelligence, but like I said, you take what you can get. And then on the relic here, we have a min rolled Twisted Heart of Okrios. It should be 8%, but the other rolls were good enough, and I wasn't going to bother with farming another one. Then for our idols here, we have Throne of Ambition. This gives us more cold damage per stack of ambition, up to 40% more cold damage, then 40% more armor as well, which is great. Then we also utilize idols like this for damage over time, cold damage over time, but you can also eventually fill out your stuff with resistance idols, so you can actually cap your resistances. And that's pretty much it for the character. Like I said, I alluded to a version utilizing critical rejuvenation and Peak of the Mountain, which we'll talk about at a future date if I play this character in Merchant's Guild. But with all that being said, this has been Dread, off to go do something else. Bye.